John, because I want to believe in God, is why I talk to atheists more than I do to theists. I don't want to be fooled. You have an argument for atheism from the hiddenness of God, which I need to understand.
Yes, the hiddenness argument is a relatively new argument. I think that it's in part because of the rising tide of secularism that people are feeling what is sometimes called the hiddenness of God much more than they once did. And perhaps our view of the nature of God, the extent to which we should think of God as loving, has changed as well. There's more of an emphasis on that, perhaps. People are more comfortable with that. And that's the starting point for the hiddenness argument. It starts with the claim that if God exists, then God is unsurpassably loving or perfectly loving. And we're talking here about the personal idea of an ultimate divine reality. So if God exists, God is perfectly loving. If God is perfectly loving, then anyone who is capable of a relationship with God and not resisting such a relationship will be in a position to participate in relationship with God. To be in such a position, you need to believe that God exists. And so anybody who's capable and non-resistant will believe that God exists. But yet that's not the case. You have plenty of non-resistant non-belief. Therefore, there's no perfectly loving God, and therefore there's no God. It's a deductive argument. All of the steps are logical steps, which means that you need to deny one of my premises. The conclusions follow logically from their premises.
So your conclusion that there is no God
Yes.
is an absolute deductive conclusion from your premises, just like 2 + 2 = 4. If you
Right.
accept your premises, I have no choice but to
Yes, that's
accept
right.
your
You need to accept the premises. You might do so with more or less confidence, and I'm hoping that the confidence level will be pretty high.
Right. But the core idea, as I understand it, is the existence of non-resistant non-belief. That means that it's not that I don't want to believe in God and I'm resisting God. I mean, that's not that. It's I have a non-resistant approach, but I still have a non-belief. So the very existence in the world of non-resistant non-belief is empirical corroboration of your argument. Is that right?
That's right. I used to call it reasonable non-belief, and people sometimes misunderstood what I was saying because they would just be looking around, using their own definition of reasonable and saying, well, is Schellenberg worried about that? He's worried about that. Why? It's something that emerges. You start at the top. The argument is an argument from above, as it were, from the nature of God, and you arrive at this concept, which is determined by its form is determined by what you have at the beginning. So you start with perfect love, and you think about the impulse to relationship that comes with perfect love, and the requirements for that. You notice that if somebody's resisting, somebody who is open to relationship,
Yeah, if they're resisting, they don't count. You're not part of the data.
Right, so it's the non-resistant.
Right. And there's certainly people like that.
You would expect to be in a position to participate.
I've been in that state at times in my life where I'm not resistant, and I have a non-belief.
That's right.
And so
and yet there's this
I'm one of your subjects.
This
I'm
very,
one of your
very
proofs.
basic point that to be in a position to participate in relationship with somebody, you have to believe that that person exists.
Okay. All right, now I really want to understand each of those premises because I'm going to examine them. Because if I agree with all of them, I've got no choice but to conclude with you that there is no God of this kind.
Right.
Of this personal theistic kind.
Exactly.
Okay, so give me the first premise again.
If God exists, God is perfectly loving.
Okay, I may or may not go totally with that, but for now I'll go with you on that.
Okay, the idea is that we're talking about a personal conception of the divine.
Right.
So,
right. I mean, in the broadest sense of loving. Okay. All right. I'm going to be careful here, but I'll go with you. All right. What do I got to do? What do I got to accept next?
Well, if God is perfectly loving and has created finite persons, then presumably they're the recipients of God's love.
Okay.
So God's going to love the finite persons who are created by God. And so what does love require? Well, it requires an openness to relationship. More specifically, it means that the person who is the lover, in this case, is going to do whatever he or she can to make sure that the one loved will always be in a position to participate in relationship with her. It doesn't mean that they're going to force them into a relationship or anything like that. It just means that they're going to try to make it the case that the one they love is able to, just by trying.
Right.
participate.
Right.
That seems to be a minimal requirement of the most admirable love, which is, of course, the only kind that you would ascribe to God. Because God is supposed to be the ultimate person. Right?
Okay.
So the ultimate person is going to be ultimately loving. And we think of love as not just involving, this kind of benevolence from a distance where, you might not want to get to know the person you're helping out. It involves a sharing, a deep sharing, a sharing of oneself, too. And so an openness to relationship. And how can you be open to relationship if the person you love isn't able to participate in relationship
And that's
with
where
you?
the question of existence would come as the next step. That there has to be a belief in the existence that has
That's
that
right.
connection.
That's a necessary condition of being in such a position. Okay. So if you've accepted with me, I don't know if you have yet, but if you've accepted
I'm nervous
with me,
because when I do, I know there's going to be a place where I have to come to your conclusion. So I'm very nervous now. I want you to know that.
Okay. All right.
You have me on edge.
Do you agree that to be in a position to participate in a relationship with somebody, you need to believe that they exist?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
To be able to,
for sure,
just
for sure,
by trying
for
to.
sure, yeah. Full
Okay.
stop. Yes, I'm happy
All
to do
right.
it. So here's where I think I would begin to look for a loophole, and that is the time factor. In other words, you're requiring everything to occur right now. You're requiring that God has to be make it so that this non-resistant non-belief would be true right now. That I would have to know that God exists right now.
Or at any time that I satisfy the relevant conditions, that is being capable of a relationship with God and non-resistant.
So I would say that certainly. So I would say if I look at the history of the universe, which at least even just in our universe looks like it's almost 14 billion years old, and if I believe in a self-consistent argument that a God or a personal being created that for the purpose of human beings, then I have to believe that time is something that just is something I can't even consider. Why did God have a system that takes 14 billion years to make the most important thing? I mean, now maybe that's an inconsistency, but if it's not an inconsistency, it means that God's approach to time is not yours and my approach to time. It's a very different sense of that.
To answer your question about time, it may indeed have taken some time to arrive at the point where we have finite persons like us who are capable of a relationship with God. But assuming that there now exist such beings, as you've accepted, then we have all that's needed for you to be persuaded by the hiddenness argument, because we can say God exists right now, finite persons who are capable of a relationship with God exist right now, and so there are certain consequences for the connection between those two facts.
You're ignoring the future, though.
Well, the future might involve a much further development of the relationship with God that begins here. A lot of people seem to have a very unidimensional understanding of the idea of a relationship with God. I have a multidimensional understanding of this. And the problem of hiddenness consists, you could put it this way, in the fact that there are lots of people who aren't even able to get started in that process. And I think that it's an important new argument for the non-existence of a traditional, loving, theistic God.